Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Katie. So today I'm going to be looking at making a little cabochon pendant. So I'm going to be using an oval shaped cabochon, and it's a really simple design, nice quick and easy one, but we're going to finish it off with this kind of double loop as well. So it's a really quick, nice, easy one to make, and I'm using these beautiful Botswana agate oval cabochons. So what I'm going to use my oval cabochon. So I'm just going to give you the measurements for that. So these are around about, let me see, where's the, so these are about 28 by 18, about 28 by 18 millimeters. I will pop that down in the description below also. And I'm going to be using some wire. So the wire that I choose to use generally is a 0.9 millimeter wire, but like I've said before on previous videos, you can use a 0.8 or a 1 millimeter too, so both structural wires. I prefer the 0.9 because it gives me that nice in between of the both, and I'm going to be using a 0.4 millimeter wire to do the wrapping with, but there's very minimal wrapping on this actual piece. So my tools I'm going to be using are my flush cutters, chain nose, and possibly my round nose, but I didn't actually use my round nose on these. They're just like the three basic tools you should always have handy. There is just one little tool that I always use of this type of pendant, just because it's very nice and gentle on the wire, and it's gentle against the gemstone as well, and it's just, this is really well used, but it's kind of an orange stick that a beauticians would use, a nail manicurist would use, and I use these to push and shape my wires into shape, and I know it's going to be nice and gentle against the stone as well. So that's what I use for that, but if you haven't got that, you can just use your fingernail or something, but if you've got long nails, sometimes that hurts. Right, so I'm just going to move things out of the way, get some wires cut, and we'll get started. So I've got my wires ready, and in front of me I have 4 pieces of 0.9 millimeter wire, and each of these lengths are 30 centimeters. You may not need a full 30 centimeters, but I would advise to take the 30 centimeters, and then if you decide to put extra flourishes or something onto this design, which I always think you should try and elaborate on tutorials and go that little bit further and put your own design aspect on them if you can. It just makes it a little bit more individual to yourself, and it gives you the ability, if you've just got that little bit of extra wire, to do that if you wanted to. But please feel free to just go with this design too. It's entirely up to you. So we're going to go through the basics of this little wrap here. So there is a little video on the zigzag weave, which I will pop just above there, and this is just a really basic weave, just blending your wires together, getting a really nice firm support for the bottom of your gemstone. So I've got 4 zigzags here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the front, I can see 4 sections of double wraps. So if I just bring that up there and get that to focus, there we go. So I've got 4 sections of double wraps at the front, and you'll see I've got 3 sections of double wraps at the bottom, and then these ones are the double wraps with extra weaves at this side. So we're going to start and finish on the back wire. So I'm going to take a length of my 0.4, so I've probably got about 50 centimeters here. You're not going to need that much just for this little wrap, but I used the excess just to wrap around this anyway, so it's just easier to cut it off in one go. So we're going to pick up one wire and pop our weaving wire underneath, and then let me just move some things out of the way. So what we want to do is look at our first wire and think about working in this center section. So this is the little section in the middle we want to wrap. So I'm going to I wrap from my left to my right. So I'm going to start over here. So I'm going to pop my wire underneath. I'm going to leave a tail at one side, just so that I've got something to hold on to. And I'm going to pop 3 anchor wraps in, 1, 2, and 3. So I've got 3 anchor wraps in there. Now I can start adding my other wires. I'm going to add coming towards me, and I'm going to pop my next wire in, make sure it's kind of leveled up with the other ones, and we're going to go over twice. So once and twice, and then once we can see we've got 2 wraps on the front there, we're going to come up in between the 2 we just wrapped. So if you remember that little C2 wraps on the front and then come up in between the 2 you just wrapped, you can't go wrong. I'm going to add our next wire and go over those ones twice. So we're totally ignoring this top wire now. I come up in between. So I can see now I've got 2 wraps on the front there. So therefore I can come up in between the 2 I just wrapped. And again, adding our last wire. So we're just going to be working on these bottom 2 now, ignoring these top 2 here. And wrapping over once, up in between. So we're wrapping over those 2 twice. I can see I've got 2 wraps on there, so I'm going to come up in between the 2 I just wrapped. Now we're in a position to go back the other direction, and there's nothing fancy about this. All we do is move our wire in this direction. So over twice. So we're doing those middle ones this time. And you can see I've got 2 wraps on the front, so we come up in between the 2 we just wrapped. Now just as you're wrapping this, just be careful. These can be splayed out a little bit just to make it easy for you, but just be careful you're not kind of squeezing the wire at this side and holding this too tight. You just want to be holding it here, because if you start squeezing these wires you're going to be manipulating them, and we want them to stay nice and smooth. So back up to those last 2 wires, and I can see I've got 2 wraps on the front there. Just let that focus. I've got 2 wraps on the front wire. So I've got my first zigzag. I can come up in between the 2 I just wrapped. And like I said, to change direction, all we do is bring our wire forwards and we're coming back in this direction. So there's nothing complicated about changing direction when we're doing a zigzag. It's just once you get to one side and you're in a position to come back down, you just move your wire towards you or away from you, whichever way you're going. So I'm just going to continue to do these, and I will join you back when I've got my 4 zigzags and my 3 wraps at the very end. So we're making a mirror image of what we've done to start with. I might just show you that there. So I'm just going to join you back. I'll be around about here, and if you want to pause the video now and catch up to the same point, I'll see you again in a second. So you can see now I've got to that same point that I just spoke about. So at one side I've got 4 sets of double wraps, and at this side, in the inside parts, we've got 3 sets of double wraps, and we've got this set of double wraps with 3 single wraps and a set of double wraps with 3 single wraps. So that is what you should have now. And what I've done is I've left my tails attached, so I'm going to cut them off so you can see where I'm cutting them. So this is going to be sit on the outside of the cabochon, and this part under here is going to sit on the inside of the cabochon. So I'm going to use that natural bend that it's got from the wire that came off the reel. And what I want to do is I want to cut my wires on the inside. This way, if there is any edges, they're going to be against the cabochon and not against anybody's skin. So making sure you cut them very nice and close to your work, and give them that little squidge, that little magic squidge, just to make sure that there's nothing that can scratch the skin. Now like I said, I've got a piece of wire which is enough left to wrap my bail, so that's why I took about 50 centimeters in that initial part at the beginning. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this wire down on my bench, and I'm popping it with the tips of the pyramids upwards, so we can see they've got 4 full pyramids there. And we want this to shape around the cabochon like so. So I'm going to grab my cabochon, decide which way you want it to sit. So I'm going to go with that way. And then holding your cabochon with your fingers here, what you're going to do is push your cabochon against. So I'm just going to bring it down as far as I can here so nothing touches. Now cabochons are slippery, so we're just going to do a little bit at a time, just shaping. I'm just going to move something out of the way that is catching there. So just a little bit of shaping at a time, and then when you get to a point where you can kind of go in like so, like I say, it will just slide off it, but that's fine. We're just getting that initial shaping that's going to sit around the bottom here. So just take your time and just kind of ask it to sit really nicely, and it's just a matter of pushing it up against the cabochon. Now I've got a beading mat on here just because it looks a lot nicer, and it's actually easier on a smoother surface for this. So if you've got something that's a smooth surface, just hop along to that, something like if you've got like a metal block, because it just gives you a little bit more to kind of push against and nothing catches on it like so. Okay, so now we've got that nicely shaped around, we don't need this bit anymore. We're going to turn it over and look at the back. So again, we've got the extra single wraps at the back, so I'm going to turn it over and look at the back. So if we look at the back of this one, you can see I just braced it a little bit with those back wires. So we're going to go in looking at these back wires and popping our pliers right up to those wraps at the bottom there. So there we go, so you can see I've got those single wraps just in here and my pliers are right up to them, and I'm just going to kink this wire towards the inside. Okay, so it's just come across, and then I'm going to do the exact same with the opposite side. Now I want these wires to stay at the back, so just kind of organise them up here a little bit. Popping my pliers in, and my pliers are right up to those weaves, and I've come all the way across like so. So I've got a cross at the back of my pendant now. So I've made this little design at this side, so I've just kinked this in. So what I did was I crossed them over like I just showed you, and then I'm just going to put my pliers in about 1/2 centimetre away from this angle that we created. So 1/2 centimetre is kind of at this side here. So I'm just going to turn my pliers this way just so that you can see, and then I'm just going to put my finger underneath there and push in the opposite direction. It's pretty hard to show this on camera, but you can see that this has turned in that opposite direction like so. So now when I put these together, I've got this kind of design here. Okay, so these two are now going to kind of join together. So if I just organise these from the rest of them, so these two are going to form the bail. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to pop my cabochon in. So I'm going to pop my cabochon in at the bottom there. Okay, and then I'm going to encourage these two to come together at the top. So I'm just going to push that up, make sure that's sat in really nicely, and making sure that these ends are quite nice and close together at the top here. And then I want to just pop that little kink in, only a very slight kink, and it's just so that I know where I need to be wrapping my other wires around. Now the next wire that I'm going to work on is this one here. So this one at the second one from the back. Okay, so we're going to hold everything in position. So this is kind of the tricky bit where you kind of have to hold everything. I'm going to grab this wire at the back, so it's the second one, so not the very back, that we've already sorted those ones out, it's the next one along. And what it's going to do is it's going to come along and it's going to go in this gap here. So we're just going to frame around the outside of our cabochon. So you can see just by moving that along, it's just framing around the outside. And then once I've got it into position, I'm kind of holding it, restraining it back there. Just want to make sure that I've got everything where I want it to be, making sure that it's centralized like so. And I'm just going to pull it around. I'm not going to wrap it the whole way around, not to start with, just pulling it around. And then I want to mimic this on the other side. So I'm going to get the back wire from this set, and it's going to go through this gap over here. So I'm just going to swap hands just so that you can see. So I've got the back wire from that side and it's going through this gap here. And holding my cabochon, making sure that everything's still in line, still straight. And I'm going to frame that side and come around. Okay, so I've not actually, it's not super secure, your cabochon will still fall out, but now I've got a nice frame around the outside of my cabochon. So now I can actually finish these wires off if I want to, unless I'm wanting to add lots and lots of fancy details at the end. In that case I would keep them. So I've just continued that one as far around as I can go, and I'm just going to snip that off. So it's only gone round one time, but that's fine, we're alright, we're okay with that. So I'm going to snip that off there, and I'm just going to pop my pliers in and tighten that up and make sure that's not going to be moving anywhere. And this wire I'm going to pull through the gap and take this around all the way, so through this gap here, so all the time ignoring these wires at the front and pulling that around, so we've got a nice tight finish on there. and snip that one off there, like so. So now my cabochon has got a frame, it's got a base, it's got a back. It will fall out if I was to let go over there. It's got that backing in place there, and everything's coming together nicely. Now what I want to do is work with these wires together, so in tandem. Okay, so decide whichever side you want to go first is absolutely fine, but whichever side you're going to go is going to go through the opposite gap. Okay, so these two, we want them to be not twisted and want them to sit parallel to each other, and then it's going to go through this gap here. So I'm poking these through this gap here. Okay, and then bring them up so they're staying quite nice and parallel with that first wire that we popped in. And again, I'm going to bring this around and all the way around this time. So I'm going to bring that all the way to there and give that a little bit of a squish, like so. Now these wires, I know I'm not going to be needing these, so I'm going to trim these off. So I'm going to trim those off at the back there, nice and short, and give those a little bit of a squish. So you can see my ends are kind of slightly protruding a little bit there. So I'm just going to squash them in just a little bit, just gently, just all little tiny movements. There we go. So we've got this side in, now we're going to pop this side in. So again, we're just going to bring these around nice and parallel, no twists in our wires with the rest of these. And what I'm doing is I'm just supporting this, because if I just do it straight over, it's going to go like this. I just want it to support that and kind of ask it where I want it to be. I want it to stay sort of so it's parallel and the same as the other symmetry. And then I'm just going to bring that around like so. So I've just wrapped that around a couple of times. Be careful you don't wrap around too many times on this bell, because you don't want it to look too chunky at the end. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave these two wires here for a second, and I'm going to bring in that little orange stick that I had. There it is. And just to separate these out a little bit, I'm just going to use, because it's wood and it's soft, I'm just going to use this just to kind of ask these nicely to open up a little bit. So I'm going to pull that in a little bit if I can. Okay, so it's only little bits of movement, and don't push too much, but you're just kind of asking these to open. You see how that's a little bit more open there? And then I can go along this one here. We're not actually making any bends in them. We're just kind of asking them to be a little bit more open, so we can see a little bit more detail in there. Okay, and then we're going to go over to this side and do the same. So we're just running this along and just very, very small movements, just kind of separating them wires and evening them out. So I'm quite happy with that. Definitely think this design works beautifully with something like a banded agate or something, because it all kind of mimics the same design. Okay, so now what we want to do is finish our bail part. So our bail is just really basically wrapped, so it's just a really simple wrap, but we do need to be quite kind of precision about the way that we wrap, because we don't want our wires to kind of cross over each other or anything. Okay, now at this point it will depend on how you finish your bail, whether you use these wires to make that extra design or the other wires. But what tends to happen with wire is you kind of go with the direction that the wire wants to go. So what I do might not exactly work for you, it's just the way that your wires are already naturally bending. And I always find that with wire, if you try and go against what it wants to do, it's not going to play ball, it's not going to be your friend kind of thing. So always kind of go and let the wire speak to you and go with the direction that the wires wants to go. So like I say, use this demonstration, this tutorial as inspiration, and use the techniques, but your wire may not decide to go the same direction as mine has, so don't worry about it, go with it and see where the wire takes it. But I always find fighting against the wire is a bad idea. So I'm just going to pop the tail of my wire just against the front of my gemstone, and that's only just to give me something, so I've got something to hold. And I'm just going to start wrapping my wires now. I've just smoothed these out and made sure they're parallel to each other, they're flat, and what we want to do is wrap around very neatly and making sure we're not going to pull any of this tight, because we want our wraps to sit really nicely and parallel next to each other and sit really beautifully neatly. And what you need to do is every few wraps, 5 or 6 wraps, don't squash it, don't do that. It's just kind of tapping it and just kind of saying, right, that's where you're sitting, please stay there. So now I've got my pendant bail wrapped. What I want to do is again finish this on the inside. So this is going to tilt forward, so if I just push that towards you, just ignore these wires for a second. So I've got my pendant on the side. I'm going to tilt it about 45 degrees forwards towards the front of the cabochon. So now I know this is going to come back and around, so this is going to be the inside of my bail. So I can cut my wire off on the inside, and again the magic squish. And again with the tail wire that we had right at the very beginning, we're just going to pop this and snip that right at the bottom there, making sure there's nothing that could catch. And then all I tend to do with bails is I use my fingers, just little moves at a time, and bring this around until it joins the bottom. This one here is obviously wanting to come over and around the front, and this one here is sitting a little bit differently. So I'm just going to leave that straight down at the back just for a moment. I'm going to bring this around to the front. I'm going to go across where we've got all these wires here. So I've come right over to the other side, and then I'm going to pop my thumb on and bring these parallel together and make that loop at the front so it sits in the middle. And now like so. I've got that nice loop on the front there. I'm going to bring this underneath here. So it's going to come underneath because we haven't connected that bail yet. And I'm going to bring one of my wires upwards so I can wrap that a little bit tighter around the top there, and this wire down at the bottom so I can tuck it in down at the bottom here. So I made my loop on the front. One wire from that has come up to the top, so I'm going to wrap that around the top of the bail and snip that off and tuck it back onto the inside of the bail around there, so I've got that nice and nipped in behind that bail. So, and this one I'm just going to cut nice and short, so this is going to kind of tuck in here. So if I just show you that, so that's the bottom wire from this swirl. I'm just going to snip that off where I want it to be and hide it away. It still needs to be a tiny bit shorter. There we go. Perfect. There we go, I'm happy with that. Pushed in that little gap there. So now I've got my little swirl on the front. I'm happy with that there. Sorry about the noise outside. It's about 28 degrees in this room. It's a really hot day, and I've got the window open. Otherwise I won't be able to breathe. I've got my bail in position, and then all I need to do is create a little swirl at the back. I know it's not connected yet or anything. I'm going to take this to one side. I'm going to create that little swirl at the back there. So I've got a swirl to match at the back, and then I can take this around the top here and finish this off. Now this my previous one was finished slightly different. I will show you a little close-up of that, but like I say, it always depends on how your wire wants to behave on the day. I tend to never finish a pendant exactly the same, so it's just working out what you can do with the wires that you've got remaining, and that's really good practice for any sort of wire work, because each time you make something it will be very slightly different. So they're very similar, but one's finished differently. So this one I used the bail wire to come around and make this front swirl, and then this one I used the side wire, but it's up to you how you kind of want to do it. And you can see this one I've got these a little bit more open. I spent a little bit more time with the orange stick kind of opening these up, but even at this stage when we've got everything set in, we can still spend more time just opening these up. I wish my neighbour would stop doing that horrible noise, sorry. So there we go, all finished, all done. So a nice easy way to set a oval cabochon pendant. and I've used bare copper wire in mine, so I might patina these later actually and make them even more pretty. I love patina, which I've got a patina video on my YouTube channel, so I'll pop a link above for that too. So thank you for watching. Pop me a like below if you've enjoyed my video demonstration, and I will see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.